If that story left you double-checking your locks or watching the rain a little differently, you're not alone. These are the kinds of stories I bring to light every week. Real encounters, dark legends, and the things that wait for the storm to cover their tracks. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Join me as we dig deeper into the stories most people won't tell out loud. Because sometimes the only thing more terrifying than the storm outside is what's waiting in the silence that follows. When I was 14, I lived in this small rural town in Florida. The kind of place where you could drive 10 minutes in any direction and hit nothing but woods or orange groves. It was quiet, peaceful for the most part. And yeah, I miss it sometimes. But one thing I definitely do not miss is the rain. Florida doesn't play when it comes to storms. They roll in fast, and when they hit hard. I'm talking torrential downpours. Thunder so loud it rattles the dishes. Lightning that could light up the whole street like it's noon. And on one particular Saturday night, I remember thinking it was the worst storm I'd ever experienced. Started out like any other rainy night. Me and my two brothers were holed up inside the house, bored out of our minds. Our sister was out at a friend's place, and the weather pretty much killed any plans of going anywhere. So we did what bored teenage boys do. We broke out the PS2 and started gaming. Now, I don't remember the name of the game exactly. It was something weird, some kind of WWE spin-off where all the wrestlers were driving cars and shooting at each other. Totally ridiculous, but for some reason it was crazy fun. We were in the middle of a match, yelling and trash-talking like usual, when the whole room went black. Just like that, boom, power gone. The only light was a dim flash from outside and the flicker of the screen going dark. Then came the sound. A sharp popping noise, almost like a firecracker. We figured it had to be the power line outside. Happens all the time in storms like this. My dad was already grabbing his raincoat by the time we left the room to check on things. Our house had 2 fuse boxes, one inside, and one mounted out by the telephone pole near the front yard. He asked me to come with him to the outside box and bring the flashlight. Said he needed me to point it while he flicked the switches. So there we were, standing in a sheet of rain so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. I held the flashlight steady while my dad opened the metal panel. The storm was relentless. Wind howling, thunder cracking. He was messing with the breakers, flipping switches, tapping connections. Nothing. The power wouldn't come back. He told me to stay put, keep trying the outdoor box, and he'd go check the one inside. I hated that. I wanted to be back inside more than anything, but I stayed. I had the flashlight pointed into the fuse box, trying to be helpful, when I heard it. A sound. Even through the pounding rain, I heard something unnatural coming from the woods behind our house. It was sharp, sudden, like a branch breaking, but deeper, more forceful, like something big had stepped on it. I turned, heart thumping, and pointed the flashlight toward the trees. The beam cut through the sheets of rain just enough to catch the outlines of trunks, leaves, and something else. For maybe half a second, no more, I swear I saw an arm. It was just there, wrapping around the side of a tree, as if someone was peeking out at me. And the moment my light landed on it, the arm pulled back. Fast. Way too fast. That was enough for me. I slammed the fuse box shut and booked it back up the porch steps. My heart was hammering in my chest as I burst through the front door and found my dad working on the indoor fuse panel. I told him what I saw. At first, he was like, maybe it was an animal, but I saw it. That wasn't an animal. It was a person. And even if he didn't completely believe me, he came outside with me, took the flashlight, and started scanning the tree line himself. I stayed by the back patio, just under the overhang, watching him walk into the woods. Slowly, the light from the flashlight grew dimmer and dimmer until it disappeared completely. The darkness out there was overwhelming. And then I realized I couldn't even hear my dad anymore. The rain was so loud on the leaves and the ground that it swallowed up every other sound. I called out to him. No answer. Then I heard footsteps. They weren't far. They were close, too close, crunching leaves. Slow, deliberate. And when I called out again, my dad finally answered, but from a completely different direction than where the footsteps had come from. My stomach dropped. I turned and sprinted toward his voice, crashing through wet bushes and mud until I finally spotted him emerging from the opposite end of the woods. His coat was drenched, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark as he made his way back to the house. I told him what I heard, the footsteps, the direction they came from. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Go back inside. Lock the doors. I'll check the rest." I didn't argue. I ran back in, locked everything, and told my mom and brothers what happened. We were all huddled by the back door, peeking out, waiting for Dad to come back. That's when we heard it. Jiggle, jiggle. The sound of the front door handle being turned. We all froze. I was about to go check. Figured it had to be Dad coming around from the front, but Mom stopped me. She looked through the peephole, and then she screamed. She yanked me back, pushed us all upstairs, and told us to lock ourselves in the bedrooms. And right then, Dad came in through the back door. His face was pale. He'd seen someone running back into the woods. He hadn't caught them, but now he was scared too. That's when we knew something was really wrong. We thought it was over. We thought the person must have run off, that we were safe. But the next morning, that illusion shattered. Dad was down in the basement early, trying to clean up after the storm. That's when he noticed the smashed window. Glass shards were scattered everywhere. Muddy footprints stained the carpet. And the worst part? A wad of cash we kept at the bar down there was gone, along with some antique stuff my mom kept on the shelves. They weren't worth a ton, but they were valuable. What scared us the most was the trail. The muddy footprints didn't just lead to the cash and stop. They went up the basement stairs and stopped at the basement door. Now, here's the thing about that door: it had a heavy-duty deadbolt lock. Industrial grade. It was the only thing that kept that person from walking right into our home, into our bedrooms. We'd been inches away from something truly awful. To this day, we don't know who it was. Just that someone was watching us from the woods. Someone was out there using the storm as cover. And if the lightning hadn't knocked out the power, if we hadn't gone outside, if I hadn't seen that arm, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. That storm saved us. But it also revealed just how close danger can get before you even realize it. You know that feeling when a thunderstorm's rolling in? There's something oddly comforting about it. The rumble of thunder off in the distance, the patter of rain hitting the windows, the occasional flash of lightning lighting up the night sky. It's like nature's version of a lullaby. At least it used to feel that way. Lately, I've started to hate storms. Not because I'm scared of thunder or anything, but because of what happened during one storm in particular. I live in the Midwest, and lately it's just been storm after storm after storm. Flood warnings, tornado watches, power outages, you name it. It's like every other night the sirens are going off, and people are rushing to check their basements for water or securing their windows. But this night really shook me. Started off as a normal evening. I was home alone, lounging on the couch, finishing up an episode of Orange is the New Black. The forecast had mentioned a late-night thunderstorm, but nothing serious. Just some wind and rain. I figured I'd just cozy up on the couch afterward and enjoy the lightning show from inside. But something felt off. Around midnight, I started seeing flashes out the window. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Figured the storm had just arrived early. But something didn't add up. The flashes, they had no sound. You know what I mean, right? Normally, when lightning strikes, the thunder follows a few seconds later. Even if it's far away, there's always that rolling boom. But this time, nothing. Not even a faint rumble. I paused the show, pulled off my headphones, and just listened. Silence. Then another flash. Bright, like a camera going off right outside my house. Still no sound. Now I was starting to get that weird feeling in my gut. That crawling sensation up your back when your instincts are screaming that something's not right, even if your brain hasn't caught up yet. So I walked into the kitchen, where there are these big glass doors that open up to the backyard. I didn't want to turn any lights on. I wanted my eyes to stay adjusted to the dark. The glow from the TV in the other room was enough to help me navigate. I crept over to the glass, leaned in close, and stared out. The sky was clear.
No clouds, no rain.
Just stars. And that's when I realized this wasn't a thunderstorm at all. There was no storm. There was never a storm. Another flash hit. This one was closer. Too close. I stepped back instinctively, heart starting to race. It had come from just outside the kitchen window. And that's when I saw him. There was a man standing right there, maybe 5 feet away, just standing on the other side of the glass, looking in. I didn't even scream, I just froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, maybe a hoodie. I couldn't make out much detail, but I didn't need to. The way he stood there, motionless, face obscured by shadows. He knew I was inside. He'd been watching me. And that's when it hit me. The flashes. They weren't lightning. They were from a camera. He'd been taking pictures. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. My mind was racing. Should I run upstairs? Call the cops? Grab a knife? I felt like I was outside my own body, watching myself move in slow motion. I made it to the living room, fumbled for my phone, and called 911. My voice was shaking so badly the operator had to ask me to repeat myself 3 times. I told them someone was outside my house, watching me, taking pictures right now. They said help was on the way. I hung up and crawled behind the couch, trying to keep myself out of sight. Every little creak in the house made me jump. I kept glancing toward the kitchen, expecting to see that figure come crashing through the glass at any moment. Minutes passed. Maybe 5, maybe 15. Felt like an eternity. And then, silence. No more flashes. I peeked up over the back of the couch and looked toward the glass doors. He was gone. I stayed hidden until the police arrived. 2 officers showed up and swept the yard with flashlights. They didn't find anyone, but they did find footprints. Dozens of them, leading all around the house, including right up to the windows, all the windows, like he'd been circling the house, peeking in at different angles. They found cigarette butts near the tree line, like he'd been out there for a while, watching, waiting. He never tried to break in, didn't damage anything, just stood there, taking photos. The police filed a report, but there wasn't much they could do. No sign of forced entry. No security footage. Nothing to go on. I installed motion-activated lights and cameras the next day. But here's the thing that still haunts me. What if I hadn't noticed the flashes? What if I'd fallen asleep on the couch, headphones still on, unaware he was just outside, taking picture after picture? Or worse, what if the pictures weren't the goal? What if he was testing the waters? That night changed everything for me. I still live in the same house, but I sleep with the blinds shut tight now. I double-check the locks. I keep the cameras running. And I never ever assume that just because there's a flash of light outside, it's just lightning. Because sometimes, it's not the storm you should be afraid of. It's what's hiding in the dark behind it. Back in 2009, I was about 13 and staying with my uncle for the weekend. My parents had just bought a new house and were in the middle of a full renovation, tearing out carpets, replacing walls, rewiring things. So the place was a total mess. Not really a safe space for a kid. My uncle offered to take me for a few days so they could work without worrying. Now, my uncle, he's an odd guy. Not in a bad way, just one of those quiet, kind of gruff, lives alone on a ranch types. He's the kind of guy who doesn't smile much and always seems like he's hiding some wild backstory. Honestly, I never felt super close to him, so the idea of spending 2 nights at his place gave me a little anxiety. But hey, I had my books, a handheld game system, and a guest room with a TV. I figured I'd just lay low, watch some movies, and coast through it. That first night passed without much happening. We ate dinner, watched a bit of TV together, then went off to our separate rooms. The ranch was quiet, eerily quiet, and surrounded by nothing but flat land and woods in the distance. I remember thinking, man, if someone wanted to disappear, this would be the place to do it. Anyway, the second night is when things got strange. It was a Saturday, and one of the biggest storms of the year had rolled in. I'm not exaggerating, it was a full-blown thunderfest. Lightning every 20 seconds, and the thunder followed almost instantly. That meant the storm was right on top of us. I was in the guest bedroom, curled up on the bed watching a movie. It had that perfect cozy vibe. Low lights, rain hammering the roof, the occasional bright flash lighting up the room followed by an earth-shaking boom. I'd always liked storms, especially when I was safe inside, but that feeling didn't last. The movie ended a little before midnight, and I was lying there with the TV off, listening to the rain and trying to drift off. That's when I heard this weird sound. It was subtle, and if the storm hadn't been briefly quieting between thunder rolls, I might have missed it. It was this metallic thud, like someone hitting a metal door with a heavy object. I sat up in bed, confused. It was just one sound, and I thought maybe something had fallen over in the garage or the barn. Maybe the wind knocked something loose. I tried to shrug it off. Then it happened again. Another clang, that same distinct metallic hit. This time it was during a lightning flash. It synced up so perfectly that it felt almost deliberate, like whoever or whatever was making the noise wanted to hide it behind the thunder. I sat there frozen for a minute, heart starting to pick up speed. I glanced at the clock. Almost 12:30 now. Should I wake up my uncle? He'd probably be pissed. He wasn't the most approachable guy on the best of days. Still, something didn't feel right. I waited. Another flash, another boom, and with it another clang. That was the third time. It wasn't random. Someone or something was doing this on purpose. I got out of bed, walked over to the window and looked out. The guest room faced the back side of the property, near the basement door. But with all the rain, the window was a blur of water and shadows. Couldn't see a thing. Then came another lightning strike. For a split second, the entire backyard lit up like daylight. And that's when I saw him. There was a man, no question about it, crouched down by the basement door. He was dressed in all black, hood pulled up, head low. In that one brief flash, I saw his arm raised like he was mid-swing, holding something. A crowbar or a wrench, maybe. And then it went dark again. I stumbled back from the window, breathing hard, trying not to make any noise. My first instinct was to shut the window, so I did. Quietly, locked it. Then I ran back to the bed and climbed in, facing the wall. I didn't want to move. I didn't want him to hear me. I laid there in complete silence, my ears tuned to every sound, every raindrop, every gust of wind. The next flash of lightning came.
No clang.
Another flash. Still nothing. Took me a second to realize what that meant. He'd stopped hitting the door. That could mean he gave up, or that he saw me. I stayed in bed, paralyzed with fear, for what felt like hours. I didn't dare look back at the window. I just kept breathing slowly, quietly, counting the seconds between lightning strikes. And then, I turned. I don't even know why. Some morbid curiosity? Some part of me that just had to know? I rolled onto my other side to face the window. And he was there, right up against the glass. I screamed louder than I ever have in my life. His face was just inches from mine, separated only by that thin pane of glass. I couldn't see much, just a silhouette, but I felt the stare. I felt him watching me. I bolted from the bed and ran to my uncle's room, yelling like a maniac. He shot up immediately, totally confused, and I told him everything. The man at the window, the banging at the basement door, the flashes, all of it. Now, my uncle might be gruff, but he doesn't mess around. He grabbed his hunting rifle, didn't even put socks on, and stormed outside into the storm like a man on a mission. I stayed inside, clutching the phone, ready to call the cops. But within a few minutes, he came back in.
Wet, angry, bleeding heart.
There was no one out there. Not anymore. The next morning, the storm had passed, and we went out to check the property. My uncle didn't say much, just scanned the area, looking for anything out of place. And sure enough, the basement door told the whole story. There were deep dents in the lock plate, fresh ones. You could see the marks where the tool had struck it over and over again. My uncle said a few more hits, and the guy probably would have broken through. He was that close. We never found out who it was or what he wanted. My uncle filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. I went home that same day, and we never talked about it again. Looking back, I can't help but wonder, what if I hadn't stayed up late? What if I'd gone to sleep like usual and never heard the noises? What if that man had made it inside the house? Sometimes, staying up past bedtime isn't such a bad thing after all. So, this happened back in the early 2000s, somewhere around 2003 or 2004. I was in college, renting a place off campus with two of my friends, Connor and Trey. We were all broke, all full of dumb confidence, and we rented this old house at the edge of a place called Hollow Ridge Road. The rent was dirt cheap, and now I understand why. The place was far out from town, tucked into this dense patch of woods, where the road narrowed to a gravel lane, and the trees leaned in from both sides like they were trying to suffocate the house. It had a wraparound porch, cracked window panes, creaky floors. Everything you'd expect from a house people like us shouldn't have rented. But hey, we were young and stupid. It had 3 bedrooms, the plumbing mostly worked, and we had space to throw parties. That's all we needed. It was October. I remember that specifically because we had just decorated the porch with dollar store Halloween stuff. Skeletons hanging from the rafters, a fog machine we borrowed from a friend, even a few fake tombstones on the lawn. We thought we were clever. The night it happened, a massive storm had rolled in. One of those unpredictable southern thunderstorms where the clouds move in like a black wave and dump water like a broken dam. Lightning was constant. Flashes every few seconds like paparazzi cameras going off around the house. And the thunder? It was brutal. Shook the floorboards. Made our crappy ceiling tiles rattle. Trey and Connor were in the living room watching some old kung fu movie, and I was in the kitchen trying to fix a leak under the sink. The storm had shorted out the back floodlight earlier, and I'd been meaning to check the breaker, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. At some point, the power flickered. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each flicker was longer than the last, like the house was fighting to stay alive. Then the lights went out completely. Total blackness. Just the sound of rain hammering the roof and wind howling through the trees. We grabbed our phones, turned on the flashlights, and started walking through the house checking everything. I figured the breaker had finally blown, so I went to the basement door, opened it up, and stared down into the darkness. Let me just say, the basement in that house was not okay. It was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed beams, some old rusted shelves, and a weird smell that never really went away. Kind of like damp wood and mildew mixed with something more metallic. Anyway, I started down the stairs, phone flashlight in hand, trying not to slip on the wooden steps. The breaker box was mounted on the far wall. I made it halfway across the room when I saw something. A shadow. At first, I thought it was just my own shadow cast by the phone light. But then it moved in the opposite direction. I froze. The basement was silent except for the wind moaning through the upper floor vents. I aimed the flashlight across the basement, sweeping the room slowly. Nothing. But then I saw it again. Right by the water heater, something moved. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was shaped wrong, like a person hunched over, but twisted at the waist. I whispered, "Hello." Nothing. I called out again. Still nothing. I backed up toward the stairs, my flashlight shaking now. And then, just as I was about to bolt up the stairs, there was a loud clang, metal hitting concrete, and I dropped my phone. It hit the floor with a crack and rolled away into the dark. I didn't go back for it. I ran. I slammed the basement door shut and pushed a chair in front of it. Connor and Trey heard the bang and came running. I was breathless, pale, and probably looked like I'd seen a ghost. They laughed at first, thought I was messing with them. But when I told them what I saw, they both quieted down. Connor, ever the logical one, said maybe it was a rat or something. Trey, on the other hand, was already halfway to grabbing the baseball bat we kept by the door. We agreed we'd check it out, together. We made our way back to the basement, this time with 2 flashlights and the bat. I unlocked the door, and slowly, we crept down the stairs. Our lights cut across the concrete, exposing nothing but dust, old tools, and shadows. My phone was there on the floor, screen cracked, but still lit. But the strangest thing? There were footprints in the dust, clear as day, bare feet.
No shoes. No socks.
Just oily-looking human footprints that trailed from the water heater right to the stairs. They stopped at the base of the staircase. Then nothing. We searched the entire basement, behind the shelves, under the workbench, even checked the crawl space. But we didn't find anyone. No sign of entry. No broken windows. Nothing. We locked the basement and agreed to sleep with our doors locked. It was around 2 a.m. when the next thing happened. Another lightning flash lit up the whole hallway outside my bedroom. And in that flash I saw someone standing there. Just a silhouette. Tall. Thin. Completely still. It was gone before I could even react. I jumped out of bed, flung open the door, and yelled down the hall, "Who's there?" Trey opened his door. Then Connor. Neither of them had left their rooms. I swear on my life someone was there. Someone who didn't belong in the house. We called the police. They came out, searched the place top to bottom. But again, no signs of forced entry. No one hiding in the attic or under the house. They chalked it up to probably a prank or your mind's playing tricks in the storm. But we knew better. The next day, after the storm had passed, we found something else. Out back, near the tree line, there was a small patch of disturbed earth. Fresh, like someone had been digging. We grabbed a shovel, half joking that we were going to find a dead body. We didn't, but we did find something. It was a glass jar, sealed tight with wax. And inside, hair, teeth, what looked like bones from a bird, and a piece of paper, rolled up tight and stained with something dark. We didn't open it. We didn't want to know what it said. Connor called his cousin, who was into witchcraft and folklore. She came out that weekend, took one look at the jar, and told us to burn it immediately and bury the ashes far from the house. We did exactly that. Afterward, she told us that what we found was likely a ward or some kind of protection charm, which, in her words, meant that someone knew something dark had happened there and was trying to keep it away, or keep it in. That night, the storm came back. We left the next morning, packed everything into 2 cars and drove straight to Connor's sister's apartment 2 towns over. We broke our lease and never went back to that house on Hollow Ridge Road. And the weirdest thing? The landlord didn't even argue, didn't ask why, didn't mention the damages or the broken window we didn't even know we'd left open. just told us, "You boys lasted longer than the last tenants." That's when I realized we weren't the first to see something in that house, and probably not the last. Let me start by saying, I used to love camping. There's something about the isolation, the way the world slows down when you're off-grid, no reception, no constant buzzing from your phone. Just you, the trees, and the open sky. I used to crave it, especially after rough weeks at work. But now, I can't even look at a tree line without feeling that old anxiety crawl up my spine. This happened in 2016. I was 28, living in southern Missouri, and a huge outdoors guy. That spring, I'd been feeling especially stressed out, work, relationship stuff, bills. So I decided to take a weekend alone in the Mark Twain National Forest. It's a beautiful place, dense with trees, rivers cutting through ancient hills. Not too far off the beaten path, but quiet enough to feel like you're alone in the world. I picked a spot I'd camped at before, near a shallow creek about 6 miles down an unmarked trail. You wouldn't find it on any ranger maps. I'd stumbled on it years back and kept it to myself. No one ever went that deep in, especially not in April when the nights were still cold. The day I arrived, the sky was gray, and there was a weight in the air. I remember thinking it felt like the forest was holding its breath. The usual sounds, birdsong, squirrel rustling, insects were muted, like nature had gone into hiding. I set up camp, built a small fire, and cooked some simple food. By late afternoon, the clouds had gotten thicker, and I could smell the storm before I even heard the thunder. That electric sharpness in the air, it hit me just as I was tying off the rainfly over my tent. Within 30 minutes, the sky opened up. The wind howled through the trees like it had a voice, and the rain came down in sheets. But I wasn't worried. I had a good tent, waterproof gear, and plenty of food and water. I hunkered down with a book, using a small lantern to read as the storm passed overhead. At least I thought it was going to pass. Hours went by. The thunder didn't let up. It wasn't the kind that rumbles once every few minutes. This was constant, aggressive, like the storm was pacing in circles above me, slamming its fists into the sky. I eventually turned off the light and tried to sleep. I was warm, dry, and safe in the tent, or so I thought. Sometime after midnight, a flash of lightning lit up the entire tent like daylight. That's when I saw the silhouette, just outside the tent wall, right next to me, perfectly still. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. At first, I thought it was just a shadow of a tree. But trees don't look like that. Trees don't have shoulders, or heads, or stand upright with arms at their sides. I waited, counted the seconds until the next flash. 1, 2, 3. Flash. It was still there. But now the shadow had moved. Just slightly. The head had tilted. Just enough for me to know it was watching. I didn't make a sound. Didn't even breathe. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Another flash. Gone. I slowly unzipped the side of the tent and peeked out. The forest was pitch black except for when the lightning lit it up. I waited for another flash, and that's when I saw it. About 15 feet from my tent, near the tree line, was a figure, standing completely still, facing me, not holding a flashlight, not moving, not calling out, just watching. I zipped the tent back up and grabbed the hatchet I kept by my pack. My first instinct was to get out, get back to the truck, but that was a 6-mile hike through wet, muddy terrain. No trails, no light. I'd never make it without breaking my neck. So I stayed put. I sat there all night, eyes wide open, clutching the hatchet and waiting. And the flashes kept coming. Every time the sky lit up, I'd check the tree line. And every time the figure was still there. Same spot, same posture. Until the final flash, maybe around 4 a.m., it was gone. Just like that. When the sun finally rose, I stumbled out of the tent, soaked to the bone and shaking. There were no footprints, but the forest felt different, dead quiet. And then I noticed something. In a wide arc around my tent, the branches on all the trees were snapped. Not broken from the storm, not blown by wind, snapped clean, like something tall had walked in a circle around my camp, brushing the trees as it passed. I packed up and got the hell out of there. Took me nearly 4 hours to bushwhack my way back to the trailhead. And when I finally reached the parking lot, my truck was the only vehicle there. Rangers told me no one had checked in that weekend. I was the only one in that part of the forest. So, what did I see? I've told myself it was a hunter. Maybe someone else camping without a permit. But deep down, I know better. That storm didn't just bring rain. It brought something else with it. Something that didn't make noise. Something that didn't blink or breathe. Something that watched me all night. And I think if the lightning hadn't kept flashing, giving it away, I wouldn't be here to tell you this. I grew up in Oklahoma, where thunderstorms aren't just a regular thing. They're a way of life. We're smack in the middle of Tornado Alley. So spring and early summer are basically a long season of storm warnings, funnel cloud sightings, and late-night sirens that make your stomach drop. Now, most homes out here have some kind of storm shelter. Ours was an old underground bunker that came with the house. You had to open this heavy metal hatch in the backyard, climb down a creaky ladder, and you'd be in this narrow concrete room with shelves of emergency supplies, 2 battery-powered lanterns, and a couple of fold-out cots. It smelled like dust and mildew, and I always hated going down there as a kid. But when a storm was bad enough, you had no choice. The night this happened, I was 19 and home from college for the weekend. It was early May, and there had been warnings all day. The air was heavy and wet, and the clouds had that sickly green tint that always meant trouble. My parents were out of town visiting my aunt in Kansas, so it was just me and our old dog Daisy at home. I wasn't too worried at first. The local news had said the worst of the storm would pass just north of us. But you know how that goes. It only takes one shift in the wind for everything to change. Around 9:30 p.m., the first warning sirens went off. I opened the back door and stepped out. The wind had died down completely, which is usually a very bad sign. And then I heard it, that low, distant roar. If you've ever heard a tornado before, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't sound like a train. It sounds like the sky itself is growling, deep and angry. I grabbed Daisy, my phone, and a flashlight, and made a run for the shelter. I swung open the hatch, climbed down the ladder, and pulled the hatch shut behind me. The storm hit just minutes later. From down in the bunker, it sounded like the world was ending. The wind screamed overhead. Something, probably a trash can, banged against the hatch. The walls vibrated with each burst of thunder. I sat there in the dim lantern light, heart racing, Daisy pressed up against me. I texted my parents to let them know I was safe, and then I just waited. After about 40 minutes, things started to calm. The thunder faded, the rain slowed, and I figured the worst was over. I stayed down there a little longer just to be safe. And that's when I heard something I'll never forget. 3 knocks, clear as day, on the metal hatch. Knock, knock, knock. Daisy perked up, ears stiff. I froze. Another 3 knocks, slower this time. My first thought was maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone saw the shelter and needed cover. But when I opened the hatch, no one was there. I climbed up slowly, flashlight in hand, sweeping it across the yard. Nothing. The lawn was soaked. The trees were still swaying from the storm, and debris was scattered everywhere. But there was no one in sight. I figured maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the wind knocked something loose and it just sounded like knocking. I went back down, closed the hatch, and tried to relax. 10 minutes later, bang, right on the hatch again. Louder this time. I leapt to my feet. Daisy was growling now, low and guttural, something I'd never heard from her before. This time I didn't open the hatch. I just waited, ears straining.
Bang!
Then, the sound of metal scraping against metal, like someone was dragging something sharp across the top of the hatch door. I stayed completely still. I didn't breathe. I turned off the lantern, plunged us into darkness, and waited. Eventually, silence. I don't know how long I sat there. Might have been an hour, maybe 2. I only turned the lantern back on when I started to shiver. It was almost 1 a.m. by then, and that's when I noticed the vent. There was a small, grated air vent built into the back wall of the shelter, just beneath one of the shelves. It was maybe a foot tall, just enough to let airflow through, but too narrow for anything to pass through. At least that's what I thought. But something was in there. I swear to you I saw movement. Just a flicker of shadow at first. Then a sound. Like whispering. Not words. Just murmuring. I stared at the vent, heart pounding, and in the dim light I saw it. And I, pressed up against the grate, watching me. I screamed, grabbed Daisy, and sprinted up the ladder. I didn't care if the storm was still going. I wasn't staying down there another second. I burst out into the night, rain pelting my face, and ran straight back into the house. I locked every door, turned on every light, and called the sheriff. When they arrived, I told them everything. They checked the yard, the bunker, the trees, found nothing. Said there were no footprints near the hatch. No damage. No sign that anyone had been there. But here's the thing. The vent in the bunker? It had been unscrewed from the inside. Not broken. Not bent. Just carefully unscrewed and placed on the ground next to the wall. They said maybe it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon or a snake had found its way into the duct. But I know what I saw. That wasn't an animal. That was a human eye. And someone had been down there with me, watching, waiting while I sat in the dark. I haven't been back inside that shelter since. We eventually replaced the hatch with a newer model, sealed off the vent, and my dad installed a camera on the back wall. It's never recorded anything out of the ordinary, but every time a thunderstorm rolls in, I can't help but remember the knocking, and that eye, watching me through the grate, waiting for me to turn off the light. This story comes from a short period in my life that I don't like to think about very often. I'd just gone through a really rough breakup. The kind that leaves you raw and hollow. I didn't want to be around anyone. Friends, family, even coworkers. So I took some time off, packed a bag, and headed out to stay at my grandparents' old lake house in northern Georgia. They'd left it to my dad after they passed, and aside from occasional summer visits when I was a kid, it had mostly sat empty. It was remote, way out there, nestled at the edge of Lake Senla. The lake was man-made decades ago and not very deep, but it stretched out in all directions with thick pine forests bordering every side. Beautiful during the day, but at night, could feel like you were the last person left in the world. I got there in late June. The place was still in decent shape, just dusty. The water was calm, the air was warm, and I figured I'd spend a few weeks reading, fishing, maybe journaling, just trying to get my head right. But on the third night, something happened that made me leave the next morning, and I haven't been back since. That day had been brutally humid. You could feel the storm coming from miles away. The kind of sticky heat where your clothes cling to your skin and the air feels thick in your lungs. Around sunset, the sky turned this deep purple gray and thunder started rolling in. I stood out on the dock with a beer in one hand, watching the clouds crawl over the treetops. The wind picked up, the lake rippled, and then came the lightning, sharp, bright forks dancing across the water. I went inside and lit some candles, since the power tends to go out during storms. I made a sandwich, grabbed a flashlight, and planned to ride it out with a book. At about 10 p.m., the storm hit full force. It was loud. The house creaked and groaned like the wind was trying to push it into the lake. Rain pelted the windows. Lightning lit up the entire living room every few seconds. I turned off my lantern just to watch the flashes light the room. That's when I saw something off. One of the windows in the back of the house faces the shoreline, just past a stretch of wet grass, maybe 30 feet from the edge of the lake. And during one of the lightning flashes, I saw a figure standing in the water. Just standing there, knee-deep, facing the house. The flash ended. Darkness. I waited. Another flash. Still there. Not moving. Not even swaying with the wind. Just watching. I ran to the window, but by the time I got there, it was too dark to see anything. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Shadows, maybe. A tree. My brain playing tricks on me. But then the lightning came again, and so did the man. Now I was sure. He was standing maybe waist deep now. Closer. Still facing me. I felt ice crawl up my spine. Who the hell would be out there? In the middle of a lightning storm? In the lake? I grabbed the flashlight, yanked open the sliding glass door, and shined the beam across the yard. Nothing. I swept it across the water. Still nothing. No ripples, no shape, no man. Just the sound of rain hitting the lake like static. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding. Then came the thunder, so loud it made the ground tremble. I went back inside, locked the door, and kept the flashlight close. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. The wind was howling now, and I could hear branches snapping in the woods. I tried to calm down, tried to convince myself I saw nothing. But I couldn't shake it, so I sat there on the couch, flashlight in hand, staring out the same window. And eventually I saw him again. Another flash, and he was right at the edge of the grass, no longer in the water. Closer. His arms were at his sides. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to study something. Like me. And I swear to God, I didn't imagine this. In that instant of light, it looked like he was smiling. But not in a way that said, I'm friendly. More like, I've been waiting. I didn't go back to the window again. I locked every door in the house, barricaded the back entrance with a chair, and spent the rest of the night sitting in the hallway with my back against the wall and the flashlight pointed at the front door. The power stayed out. The storm didn't ease up until close to 3 a.m. And that's when something tapped on the window.
Top. Top. Top.
Slow. Deliberate. I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, too afraid to even breathe. Eventually, the tapping stopped. And when the sun rose, the rain gone and everything soaked in mist, I finally worked up the courage to go outside. There were footprints, leading from the lake, across the grass, up to the glass door. But none going back. Just a trail of wet impressions in the dirt and mud. Barefoot. Human. I packed up that morning and left. Didn't bother cleaning, didn't turn the power back on. Just locked the front door and drove. My dad offered to sell the lake house a few months later. I didn't say anything, just told him to go for it. I never told him what I saw, because the truth is, I'm not sure what it was. A stranger? A storm-dazed hiker? Something else? All I know is, I saw a man standing in the water, and I don't think he was alive. I used to work the night shift at a distribution warehouse just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't a glamorous job. Mostly forklifting, loading trucks, and organizing pallets. But the pay was decent, and the night shift meant fewer people, less noise, and weirdly enough, more peace. I had a routine. Work from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., drive home on winding mountain roads, make a bowl of cereal, and crash around sunrise. I lived in a small, 2-bedroom rental cabin tucked in the woods about 30 minutes out of town. I liked it because it was quiet, remote, and cheap. The kind of place where you could sit on your porch and only hear wind through the trees and the occasional owl. But that quiet can get unsettling sometimes, especially during storms. This happened in September of 2021. I'll never forget it because the power company had sent out one of those mass alerts a few days earlier about potential outages due to incoming thunderstorms. Something about shifting pressure systems, high winds, blah blah. I skimmed it. The day leading into it was deceptively normal. Clear skies.
No rain.
I left for my shift like usual, worked through the night, and finished just after 4 a.m. That drive home, though, that's when things got weird. It had started raining while I was inside the warehouse. Light at first, but by the time I got to the car, it was coming down hard. And the lightning? Non-stop. It flashed so frequently it looked like paparazzi going off behind the trees. The road home was slick, and the woods on both sides felt extra dark, like the headlights weren't reaching far enough. Still, I made it back to the cabin without issue. Pulled in, parked, grabbed my stuff, and hurried inside. I was drenched by the time I locked the front door. The storm was right on top of the mountain now. The thunder rattled the windows, and the cabin creaked every time the wind shoved against it. I towel-dried my hair, flipped on a battery lantern since the lights were flickering, and made my way to the kitchen for that ritual bowl of cereal. That's when I heard something on the roof. At first, I thought it was a branch. A lot of pines around the cabin, and storms love to snap off limbs. But then I heard it again. Thump, then a scrape, then something dragging. I walked over to the window and peeked out, trying to see if a tree had come down. The rain was coming in sideways, and the lightning lit up the woods in pulses. I went to the back door, stepped out under the overhang, and looked up. And I swear to you, there was something crawling across the roof. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a raccoon or a possum. This thing moved wrong. Fast but not smooth. Like it had too many joints or its limbs bent the wrong way. I ducked back inside and slammed the door. Then it hit again. Thump, thump, thump. Directly over the living room. I ran to the front door and locked the deadbolt, even though I wasn't sure what good that would do. My first thought was to call someone, but the power flickered again, and then went out completely. Cell signal? Dead. No bars. Nothing. That's when the footsteps started. Heavy. Slow. Walking from one end of the roof to the other. I turned off the lantern. Sat there in the dark. Listening. Whatever it was, it stopped moving. And then, I swear to God, I heard it breathing. Right above me. A deep, rattling breath that didn't sound human. Like it was sucking in air through a throat lined with water or mucus. Then crack. The sound of shingles popping. I backed into the kitchen, grabbing the only thing nearby, a long metal flashlight. Felt laughable, like holding a butter knife in a gunfight. I kept my back to the counter, heart pounding. Boom! Thunder rattled the walls. And right after that, something slid off the roof and landed on the ground outside with a heavy thud. I didn't even look. I just ran to my bedroom, slammed the door, and pushed the dresser in front of it. I lay in bed, flashlight in one hand, the other over my mouth to stop myself from making noise. I don't know how long I stayed like that. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is waking to daylight creeping through the curtains. Everything was quiet. No more rain.
No thunder. No footsteps.
I got up, slowly moved the dresser, and peeked out into the cabin. Nothing looked touched. No damage. No broken windows. But when I opened the front door and stepped outside, I saw it. Long gouges in the roof, deep claw-like scrapes running down the shingles. Like something had dug in with fingers or talons as it moved. And on the ground below, footprints. Not human, not animal, just wrong. They had 5 toes like a person, but the heel was elongated and narrow, like the foot was stretched or deformed. And they were spaced in a pattern that made no sense, like whoever made them didn't walk upright for long. I left that afternoon, packed up a duffel, locked the cabin, and stayed in a hotel for 3 nights. When I came back, I had the roof professionally inspected. The contractor asked if I'd been dragging tools up there. I told him no. He just shook his head and muttered, "Weird." I lived there another 6 months before moving closer to town. But I'll never forget that night. The way it moved. The way it watched from above. The way the thunder seemed to hide its sounds. Like it knew how to time its movements between the crashes. And now, whenever a storm rolls in and I hear something hit the roof, I don't check. I just wait. Because sometimes the storm brings more than just rain. I was living in Tennessee at the time, helping my aunt manage a bed and breakfast she owned in the mountains outside Gatlinburg. It was a cozy place. 2 floors, 5 guest rooms, wraparound porch, and a view of the Smokies that looked like something off a postcard. Most weekends we were booked solid with tourists. But this was a random Tuesday night in late spring, and we had no guests. Just me, my aunt, and the quiet buzz of crickets outside. I just finished cleaning the kitchen and was locking up for the night when the weather took a sudden turn. It had been warm and breezy all day, but around 10:30 p.m., the sky snapped shut like someone flipped a switch. The air went thick, still. Then the thunder started. You could feel it rumbling up from the ground, shaking the wooden floorboards like a warning. My aunt came downstairs to grab a glass of water, and we both looked out the back windows at the sky lighting up over the hills. It was one of those classic mountain storms. Fast, loud, and unpredictable. "Storm shelter's prepped if it gets bad," she said, nodding toward the hallway closet where we kept emergency supplies. Then she headed back to her room. I stayed up. Storms have always made me restless. There's something about the sound of rain hammering a tin roof, the rolling thunder. It keeps my brain buzzing. So I brewed some tea, grabbed a blanket, and went to sit on the screened-in porch out front. That porch was my favorite part of the house. Big wooden swing on one side, old rocking chair on the other, and a view of the gravel driveway sloping down through the woods. I sat in the swing, legs curled up, sipping my tea as lightning lit up the forest in rhythmic pulses. It was peaceful in a strange, chaotic way, until I saw her. I don't even know how long she'd been standing there. She was at the bottom of the driveway, maybe 40 feet away. A girl, just standing in the rain, facing the house. She couldn't have been older than 10 or 11, barefoot, wearing what looked like a white nightgown or maybe a slip dress, soaked through, hair plastered to her face. I blinked, leaned forward, and set my cup down. The lightning flashed again. She hadn't moved. I got up, walked to the edge of the porch, and opened the screen door. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" No answer. Just standing there, head tilted, rain pouring down. Now, let me make something clear. I'm not the kind of person to jump to ghost stories. My first thought was, lost hiker's kid. Maybe someone from a neighboring property. I stepped out into the rain, barefoot, squinting against the water in my eyes. I walked down the steps. The girl didn't move. I made it halfway down the gravel path, heart starting to thump. Something felt off. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the air around her was still, even with the storm raging. The rain seemed to avoid her somehow, like it bent around her. I slowed my steps. "Are you lost?" She finally moved, her arm raised slowly, and she pointed past me, toward the porch. Behind me, I turned fast, and for a split second I saw something sitting in the porch swing. It was a figure, large, unmoving, not my aunt, not anyone I knew. I whipped back around to the girl, and she was gone. Gone. No sound.
No splashing footsteps.
Just not there anymore. I ran back up the path, flew onto the porch, but the swing was empty. Still, dry. That's when I noticed it. The swing was gently swaying, just slightly, like someone had just gotten up. I yanked open the front door, slammed it behind me, and locked every bolt I could find. I checked on my aunt. She was asleep. No signs of anything wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, the storm had passed. Birds were chirping, sun was out, and everything was covered in that post-rain shine. I stepped outside to get some air and clear my head. At the bottom of the driveway, right where the girl had stood, there were footprints. Small, bare feet, leading out of the woods, but not going back in. That afternoon, I asked my aunt about it. She got quiet. Then she said, "You saw her too, didn't you?" I froze. Apparently, that wasn't the first time the girl had appeared. Over the years, a few guests had mentioned seeing her out by the woods during storms. Always alone, always pointing. My aunt never said anything because, well, what do you say? But here's the part that really got to me. She said the swing sometimes creaks at night, even when no one's sitting in it, even when the air is completely still. And a few times, just a few, she's come out in the morning and found little wet footprints on the wood. And sometimes, she finds a handprint on the glass, small, like a child's, right at eye level. That was the last time I stayed there during a storm. I don't know what the girl wanted. Don't know if she was a warning or a memory or something far more literal. All I know is, she didn't want help. She wanted me to see. And whatever was on that porch swing with her, it wasn't meant to be part of this world. This happened in 2018 in a small town just outside Amarillo, Texas. My brother and I had inherited our dad's old hunting cabin after he passed. It was tucked deep into the Panhandle Prairie, flatlands stretching forever, nothing but brush and barbed wire fences for miles. The kind of place where you can see a storm coming from 30 miles away. We hadn't been out to the cabin in years. After Dad passed, it felt wrong, like walking into a memory we weren't ready for. But then our cousin Brian called, said some local ranchers reported the front door swinging open, and we figured we better go check it out before squatters moved in. It was early July when we made the trip. Hot, sticky, sky so bright it made your eyes water. The first 2 days were uneventful, just fixing up the place, cleaning out spider webs, patching holes in the screen door, clearing brush from the back fence. We weren't expecting the storm. Texas storms don't play around. When they hit, it's fast, violent, and biblical. And out in the open prairie, there's nowhere to run. No trees to break the wind. No buildings nearby. Just you and a whole lot of sky. We'd gone to bed early that night, around 9:30, because there was nothing else to do.
No Wi-Fi, no TV.
Just the hum of cicadas and the low rumble of thunder miles off in the distance. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a boom so loud I thought a bomb had gone off outside. Lightning. It struck so close, the flash burned through my eyelids. The second after, thunder crashed hard enough to rattle the cabinets in the kitchen. I sat straight up, heart pounding. The cabin was pitch black. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the living room. My brother, Jake, was already there, barefoot, holding a baseball bat. "You hear that?" he said. I nodded. "I think it hit one of the fence posts out back," he muttered, already heading for the door. I stopped him. "Wait, look." The back door, deadbolt just a few hours earlier, was wide open. We both froze. Jake raised the bat and I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut across the kitchen and landed on the doorframe. Rain was pouring in sideways. Wind howled like it was trying to drag the whole cabin off its foundation. We stepped outside onto the back porch, scanning the yard. The lightning flashed again. And that's when we saw it. There was a man standing by the fence, just beyond the last post, near the edge of the tall grass. He wasn't moving, wasn't flinching against the wind or the rain, just standing perfectly still, arms down at his sides. I raised the flashlight and pointed it at him. Nothing. Like the beam just didn't reach him. It faded out halfway, swallowed by the dark. Then came the next flash. And suddenly he was closer, still not moving. Jake whispered, "Was he just there?" "No," I said, breath catching. Flash again. Closer. At the edge of the yard now. Maybe 20 feet away. Face still hidden in the dark. "I'm going back inside," Jake said. "Screw this." I agreed. We backed up toward the cabin door, keeping our eyes on him. One more lightning strike, and this time he was gone. Like he'd blinked out of existence. We rushed inside and locked the door. Double-checked every window, closed the curtains, and sat in the middle of the room with the bat and flashlight between us. Neither of us spoke. We just listened. And then, the back door creaked open again. This time, the bolt was still in place. Still locked. But the door opened anyway. Jake stood and slammed it shut. "I locked that. I watched you," I said. We backed away from it. And then, the thunder crashed again, so loud it shook the walls. Boom! At that exact moment, the power flicked back on for a split second, and all the lights in the cabin lit up. And in that brief flash of brightness, we saw a figure standing in the hallway. Tall, pale, hands dragging against the walls like it was guiding itself by touch. Then darkness again. We didn't run. We bolted. Straight out the front door into the storm. We didn't stop running until we were in the truck. I fumbled the keys, shaking so badly I dropped them between the seats. Jake was screaming at me to move, and I finally got the engine started. We drove 30 miles through driving rain before stopping at a gas station. Sat in silence for a long time, soaked, shaking. Eventually, we returned with a sheriff's deputy. Of course, there was no one in the cabin. No signs of forced entry.
No footprints.
No wet trails on the floor. The deputy said maybe the wind had popped the door. That we were tired, stressed, seeing things. But then we showed him the hallway. And that's when his tone changed. Because burned into the wall, where the figure's hand had dragged, was a set of long black smears. Like soot or ash.
No fingerprints.
Just 5 long marks down the length of the hallway. Like the storm had brushed up against the cabin. We boarded up the windows, changed the locks, never went back after that. The local ranchers still call that area Double Strike Ridge, because it's where lightning hit twice during one of the worst storms in the region's history. But now, some of them won't even ride their horses past that stretch of land. They say lightning's drawn to what's already burned. Me? I don't know what we saw that night, but I'll never forget it. And every time thunder shakes the walls of my house now, I listen, not for the storm outside, but for footsteps inside.